in Parliament House. As a part of this acknowledgement, I would like to invite Cam Smith up to accept the award for Regional Growth, Connecting Communities, Launceston Public Wi-Fi Network. I'll try not to put my fingerprints all over it this time. There you are, Cam. Congratulations. Excellent. A round of applause again. Thanks, Cam, and your team. And for anyone who's seen, it was the Prime Minister who was asking for the selfies with Cam and the trophy, so it was a really fantastic acknowledgement there too, so thank you. Moving to 3, declarations of interest. So a councillor must declare any interest that a councillor has in any matter before any discussion on that matter commences. Noting that we do have some declarations of interest today. Councillor Kai, 9.1. Councillor Pentridge, 9.1. Any further declarations of interest? There being none, we will move forward to the confirmation of the minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held at the City of Launceston Council on the 27th of June be confirmed as true and correct record. Do we have somebody to move the minutes? Councillor McMahon to move. A seconder, Councillor Harris. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Noting today as well, as I look around the table, we do have apologies from Councillor Professor Raze and Councillor Palmer. Into 5 now, council workshops at 5.1. The recommendation is that council notes the council workshops conducted and attendance since the last council meeting for these purposes described. Flood mitigation, notice of motion, project scope update, child and youth safe organisation, City of Launceston regional priority projects, Launceston Central CPI request, and the Gorge Restaurant and Cafe lease and Albert Hall. Somebody to move. Councillor Dawkins? A seconder, Councillor Harris? Councillor Dawkins, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'd just like to acknowledge the child and youth safe organisational structure and strategy that we've got now moving forward. I felt a profound sense of connection to that particular briefing. The statement of commitment was sobering and moving, as I said at the time. I want to pay tribute to the council officers working on this. They're to be commended for their sensitive and respectful work.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Harris is the seconder. Any comments to workshops around the table? Anything further to close? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. We don't have any councillors' leave of absence applications identified as a part of this agenda at item 6, and we also don't have any community reports this week. So we'll move through to agenda item 8, public question time. At 8.1, public questions on notice. 8.1.1, we will see Ray Norman homelessness, environmental sustainability, Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery. And also we have a question on notice from Mr. Robin Smith, graffiti removal in Brisbane Street Mall and the free Tiger Bus service. At 8.2, we have public questions without notice, noting that the rules and regulations, they are displayed and available upon entry. You may ask a total of 3 questions each. Now, I do have one with some prior advancement from Mr. Jessen, Rodney. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind just moving to the microphone, just name and your suburb, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rodney Jessen, and I live in the City of Launceston. I'm a small business owner. We have a company here in Launceston called Rare. We are consulting engineers and project managers, and we employ about 40 people. I recently became a resident of Launceston when we moved into the Quadrant Mall, or what's known as Bookmakers Lane. Many of you here would be aware of this development because it was approved a little while ago by this council. And we've done a lot to enhance the property, and we've really tried to follow what we believe was council's vision, which is set forth in your investing in the city. The final part of my project is to get a strata so there's our visitor accommodation, there's a shop front, and then there's the apartment upstairs where we live. We lodged our strata application with council back in March. There, like all properties in the Quadrant Mall, there is an awning which overhangs into the quadrant, which is a public road. We understand that council has to give permission for this awning to be there before the strata plan can be signed off. I have some emails here just in correspondence that either my surveyor or myself have had with council. I'll just quickly read an email here from Lynn Norris. Keeping in mind we lodged on the 8th, back in March. This email was dated the 16th of April. The briefing will be presented to councillors at a workshop held 6th of June. No pub not open to the public. Following the workshop discussion, it is hoped council report will be included in the June 13th meeting, or maybe the 27th of June, and hopefully it'll be the 13th of June. I followed up when that didn't happen recently on the 5th of June, when I knew it wasn't happening, with Michelle Gray of council. I'll just read a part of her email. This matter I anticipate being able to obtain decision in July. I've been directed to present to the workshop on the 20th of June. So we were told that after that workshop, today's meeting, 11th of July, that the matter would be presented to this council. I looked at the agenda yesterday and found that this matter is not going to be presented to the council today. So my question to council is, why is this not being presented?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jessom. I really do appreciate you coming in voicing your concerns around the timelines. I'll have to take that one on notice just to find out the process as to how this has found itself not on the agenda, but I will say that the councillors have had quite an extensive amount of work when it comes to warnings, and the further investigations into those warnings has shown a little bit of slowness, and I will be honest and say that some of that has come from around the table by wanting to understand the full severities of warnings and to actually understand what that means. And there's a few around the city. So I will take it on notice and have a bit further investigation. But some of that hold up has come from just further investigations into warnings and getting councillors across the briefs and their own understandings as well, my own put forward there as well. So thank you for the question. We'll get a report to you and we'll ensure that we clear that up too. Thank you. Further questions without notice?
Smith, thank you. Robin Smith, on behalf of Coffee Republic of Business and the Brisbane Street Mall. Question to you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I'm looking at some time in the future of bringing a motion to have the activities in the city of boycotting, protesting, and divesting of business and sanctioning not a permitted use for permits for activities that take place in the areas that you issue permits, which are the Brisbane Street Mall, Civic Square. How would you vote on that if that were a motion and you had the vote on it, which you may well in the future?
I'll have to take that on notice because I would have to have all of the information put before me to have a real good understanding of what that would mean, how that legally would put council at any risks when it comes to the legalities, and also how that aligns strategically with council's plans. So I don't feel comfortable to answer that one directly right now without understanding the breadth and diversity of what that would mean without saying anything.
Thank you. A question to previously, well, probably since about 2021, I've asked a number of questions that they relate to City Heart Stage 2 now. Most of the questions are asking for justification for the decisions. The main document that council gives is, as the pre-genitor for most of the civic changes to the CBD under City Heart, has been a document called Launceston Public Spaces and Public Life, January 2011. Most people refer to it, I think, as the Gell Report. When I look at the Gell Report, it, as I read it, and I hope to think you would have read it, and the understanding I get from it is that the city is a place for people. It is a place for enjoying the walking and the shopping and the living. But there's a proposal we have for a number of street changes, and that is to turn some one-way streets into two-way streets and some two-way streets into one-way streets. And they've come up over the last few years at several times. When this document, the Gell report, is pointed to as the proponent of this, I can't read that in the document at all. It doesn't seem to support the swapping of, say, St. John Street traffic and moving it to Charles Street, turning Charles Street into two-way to accommodate that traffic, or the Kingsway into a one-way street. I can't read that. The only thing I can find in the entire document is page 88, and it has one throwaway sentence. Change one-way streets to two-way streets. The analysis of traffic volumes shows that one-way streets can act as barriers to pedestrian network. Then it says the answer is to convert all one-way streets to two-way streets. Other than that, it doesn't seem to talk about that at all. In fact, this is almost contrary to the entire document. Do I read that correctly in that document?
Oh, I can just say that in the lead up in this term of council, we've had many presentations around different configurations and different work for what City Heart would look like, streetscaping, place making, and conversations have far moved on since 2011, as that is a strategic document, of course, but there is definitely further development that's happening in these spaces with a manner of experts, and it will be down to this council to further converse over what City Heart looks like going into the future. It's something that I'm excited with the new CEO to be here, to bring some fresh eyes over a project, City Heart 2, and to get some direction from the strategic alignment into what this term of council looks like, whether that involves two-way streets or whatnot. It'll come down to decisions around the table and further workshopping for sure.
Thank you. Question asked previously a week or two ago was again about City Heart Stage 2, the bus interchange. And the reason I raised this was because the proposal to move the bus stops from on street to a termini or an interchange was opposed by Metro. And I wanted to be clear that it was actually Metro for 10 years that have suggested their preference is to keep bus stops on the street because it's closer to business. It's, for a whole multitude of reasons, preferable, particularly given the like that Metro's experience with the bus interchange built in Glenorchy, antisocial behaviour, and Rosny, antisocial behaviour. So I just wanted to be clear that it was Metro for 10 years that have publicly stated that they are opposed as a bus operator to an interchange versus having them scattered about in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you. There being no more, we will move through to agenda item 9, Planning Authority. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning Act and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regards to items included in agenda item number 9, Planning Authority. 9.1 is 169 St Leonard's Road. St Leonard's subdivision, subdivide land into 53 residential lots, construction associated infrastructure, roads, public open space, services, work within road reserves of Pinsley Drive, St Leonard's Road. Before we get into the recommendation, we will move through to some public speakers. So I do have a couple that have been pre-provided. Do I have a Miss Abby Turner?
Sorry, got someone with me. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Mann.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name's Abby Turner and I live in Pinsley Drive, St Leonard's. I'm a frustrated resident of Pinsley Drive. Previously, the council, not necessarily you, have approved the use of the adjacent land to Pinsley Drive for a large industrial area. You approved a site that does not provide adequate parking for the large business that have been previously and currently rented the sites. This is a failure of the council, in my opinion, to ensure that the plans included adequate parking for current use. The end result is staff parking on St Leonard's Road, and hence when you remove parking on St Leonard's Road for the new subdivision, you're now making a situation caused by the council approval to impact on current residents, where they're going to park in our street, which they currently do. I appreciate the plan is offering indented parking bays, but the facts remain you are removing parking in the area. Also note over the past couple of years, we've had increased activities at the Athletic Centre. When this occurs, our street is filled with vehicles because there's insufficient parking in St Leonard's. I noted on my concerns the lack of vision when pulling out of Pinsley Drive, and as expected, nobody bothered to inspect the concern. And on the notes that I've read prior to this agenda, you noted that vehicles must be parking illegally on St Leonard's Road to cause that issue. This is not the case, and is in fact caused by vehicles parking approximately 4 houses in each direction of Pinsley Drive, causing impairment of vision when pulling out. This goes to my point that you're not residents in this street and have no idea the impact of your current planning will have on the people living there. The vision when pulling out of 169 St Leonard's Road is much clearer, with on-street parking only to the south of the driveway. When pulling out of Pinsley Drive, we're faced with an industrial driveway on the north and south side, on the opposing side of Pinsley Drive, which at times has trucks pulling out in both directions, while we are watching the vehicles travelling at 60 kilometres one direction and 70 kilometres the other, with restricted parking view. I don't see how adding more vehicles to this situation is practical. The application states that they don't want to add another entrance onto St Leonard's Road. Council have previously approved a 29-unit cul-de-sac right next to the Athletic Centre entrance, which is a lot closer in distance between Pinsley Drive and 169 St Leonard's Road. I don't see how adding another entrance onto St Leonard's Road can be an issue, especially with a clearer vision and there are no industrial driveways impacting the traffic conditions. It has been mentioned that Pinsley Drive is a short to medium term entrance. You can surely not assume people will split their travel 50-50 and travel out of the other ends of St Leonard's and Waverley when they could simply come down the hill and out our street. Generic figures on how you think traffic will flow will be an unfortunate consequence for us to live in the long term. Whilst I appreciate you aren't here to manage market value of the property, you must take into consideration the impact on changed traffic conditions on the local residents who have been paying rates. There was no future plan of St Leonard's that included a subdivision off Pinsley Drive, so I think it is fair to assume that as a result some care should be taken into this decision. Adding this many vehicle movement through this quiet street will remove any safety we currently enjoy of our children being able to play on the nature strip or in the cul-de-sac. I was of the impression when purchasing my house in this street that I would be able to raise my children in the safety of the quietness of the street. This is going to be taken away when my house is going to be placed on the corner of a busy T-junction intersection. I'm not disputing the subdivision. Do what you want with the land, but do it from 169 St Leonard's Road. As I mentioned in my press representation, just because Pinsley Drive is the cheaper option doesn't make it the best option. Thank you.
Ms. Greggs?
Thank you. Hello, Claire Gregg, 70 Meredith Crescent, South Launceston. I'm here speaking for the application for JAC Group and in my own right as Metier Planning. So the land has been zoned general residential for a very long period of time, even way back in the 1996 planning scheme. And there is a significant underlying demand for housing in Launceston that we all witness every day. This subdivision has been carefully designed after a long period of consultation with Launceston City Council officers, as well as our sub-consultant team. The subdivision will reduce and remediate existing stormwater constraints in the area and has been carefully designed to ensure appropriate connectivity with the surrounding land. We are very much looking forward to rehabilitating the natural values of the degraded creek line to create a fantastic open space area. And we do really acknowledge the concerns of the residents of Pinsley Drive regarding traffic. In relation to access directly onto St Leonard's Road, this was carefully weighed up and was originally our first option. However, due to a range of factors, that was ruled out, including the width of that area, the cut that would be required, whether we could achieve appropriate grade on that road. It wasn't really the closeness to Pinsley Drive that was the issue, it's the closeness to the collector road that is in the draft master plan for the land to the north, which will then become the primary connector through that area. So whilst we acknowledge the short-term issue that this will cause, eventually this land will be integrated into a wider traffic network for the whole area. And we'd also like to congratulate Launceston for recently receiving funding for the St Leonards area. So that's great. So we thank council officers for their work and their diligence in this application and the appropriate conditions that they've placed on the permit, and we commend their recommendation to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any further public speakers to the item? There being none, we'll move through to the recommendation. So the recommendation is that council approves a permit and it be granted for the subdivide land into 53 residential lots and balanced lots under the published conditions. Somebody to move the recommendation? Deputy Mayor? A second to Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you for the representative and your comments. And I hear 100% what you're saying. Also note the Speaker who spoke in favour of the motion as well, and also note the work that's been done by our officers in regards to trying to explain to us mere councillors how all this works. Now, I guess the situation in any development, usually there is something that creates a pinch point for somebody. The question is whether that's sufficient to make the development application something that we can satisfy ourselves, meet the commitments or the requirements of the planning scheme. And it's clear through the process that's been gone through and the comments that have been made to respond to the representatives that there's been a lot of work done in regards to the Pinsley Drive conversation as opposed to the 169 St Leonards Road access, which suggests that the better solution is out of Pinsley Drive. Clearly, the traffic interaction on St Leonards Road is quite high in regards to traffic that go up and down for residential purposes, going backwards and forwards. And I guess over time, as our St Leonards master plan takes place, it's going to even put more impact on that road. So therefore, I guess question whether at some stage lights and things like that are going to be required along those areas. But that's for a discussion, I think, in another day. I appreciate the comments that have been made in relation to the concerns, and clearly I don't drive in and out of Pinsley Drive every day, so therefore I don't know. But our traffic engineers who have been assessing road traffic movements for many years and provide advice to us in relation to all of these matters are advising us that this works and will continue to work. And clearly the future development of other lands in St Leonards are going to improve the road network and therefore give up other options for traffic to escape where it currently will come out via Pinsley Drive. My view is that the subdivision is a well thought out subdivision. The land blocks and things like that are really good, and it's land where we're in a position where we actually need more residential land to come on the market. And I'm aware there are other residential lots that are coming on in St Leonards. So I guess my plea is in supporting this today is that we as our road engineers and looking broadly at the traffic start to really seriously look at the concerns that are being raised by residents, because I think they're only going to amplify as time goes on with further developments in St Leonards. And we need to be continually getting ahead of the solution rather than putting solutions in place afterwards. I understand why we wouldn't want to access it off 169 St Leonards Road. Just having walked up there the other day and looking at the topography, the steepness and the site visions from there, I don't think are significantly better as a result of and Pinsley Drive. And I guess the fact that it's very near Pinsley Drive and going to be very near to another outlet route at some stage in the future, it just means another access onto St Leonards Road, which I don't think is warranted. So I'll be supporting it today, but note the comments made by the representative, and I would just encourage our council to continue to work on our road solutions to ensure that we look after all of the residents in the area.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A question, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some questions regarding, and it's probably to the officers in regard to the roads themselves and the road width, particularly of Pinsley Drive. I travel along St Leonard's Road 2 or 3 times a week, so I'm quite familiar with it. And that is clearly an arterial road. It is quite a wide road, has in fact a speed limit of up to 70 kilometres an hour, which always amuses me that to me it should be a 60 kilometre one, but it's not one of our roads in certain parts. Just around this intersection, actually with Pinsley Drive is where it changes. But my question is in regard to the road width of Pinsley Drive, and it will effectively cease to be a residential street and become what I'll call a collector road. And what are the dimensions for a collector road as distinct from an arterial road or a residential street? In width is what I'm talking about there, which then allows for parking on the side of the road and other types of things that such roads need to have.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
Pinsley Drive is 6 metres wide, the current existing road width. The first, in the TIA report, they recommended that not to have any parking, to restrict parking on Pinsley Drive, but our council's preferred option is to have that intended bay so that there won't be any congestion, so that there will be two-way flow without any congestion in that area. I'm not sure about the collector road width. I believe Michael will be the right person to answer that question.
Thank you, Town Planner Dilip.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Information pertaining to this is contained within issue 2, within the representation. So this would actually be classed as a local through street with a width of 8.9 metres. So that would be from face of curb to face of curb. So essentially what we're doing by indenting parking bays is sort of retrofitting to gain that similar width. So what that 8.9 metres would get you 1 on-street parking and 2 trafficable lanes, if you like, with the indented parking gets you 2 trafficable lanes and indented parking.
To achieve that throughput as what do you call it?
A local through street.
A local through street, another new term of a local through street. Will there be a yellow painted line to stop anybody from parking who may be working in the factory across the road and just say, oh, there's no line, so I'll park there, and therefore create the hazard? We only have a street that's only 6 metres wide.
Look, there's a number of line marking options that could be complementary to the intended layout in the road. A solid white line down the centre of the road will achieve the same thing as yellow lines. So it's certainly something that we'll monitor and review as required.
Right. Thank you for that. I might just reserve my right to speak on this one if I can at this stage. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Harris. I have some further questions. Councillor Britton, then Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you very much, Matt. Look, I do rise to support today, and notwithstanding, I hear the representative and what they're saying. My only question is, obviously, there's an issue around parking up there, visibility already from what they've said. I don't think that necessarily impacts the development application today, but can we get anyone up there to have a look? Have we got the appropriate signing, appropriate marking, things like that? That's just a general question. Yeah.
Town Planner Dilip.
There are conditions on the planning permit to ensure that whatever the proposed recommendations from TIA report in terms of the urban left turn and right turn and then giveaway, to make sure that there will be enough room to come around the St. Leonard's Road to it.
Yeah, I think I understand that, but it would appear there's currently an issue up there with where people are parking and how they're using the road. Can that, notwithstanding the proposal, can that be addressed for them as well?
Yep. Okay. Councillor Dawkins.
Yeah. Look, my question is along the same lines. It's outside of planning, but I'm wondering if there is something council could do around that line of visibility from Pinsley Drive to St Leonard's Road, maybe around checking nature strips and that kind of thing, or anything we can do to increase visibility, because hearing someone doesn't feel comfortable, leaving their drive, that's quite concerning, or leaving their street onto a main road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Another question, Councillor Harris.
While we're on the roads, I believe, and I did read the report, but it's just struggling to come back to me, we're going to make a right-hand turn centre lane into the subdivision. Will that then have exclusions of parking prior to the entrance to Pinsley Drive, on both the north and southern side to enable sight lines as part of that, or will simply there be a centre turning lane to turn right when coming from the southern direction? Hopefully I've remembered it correctly.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. Just having a quick look at the plans to ensure that it's right information.
I'm just going to get my bearings, sorry. So what it shows on the plan submitted is that it wouldn't be it would result in a banned parking situation on the western side of St Leonard's Road. So what you can see is that the traffic is essentially moving over to create that right-hand turning lane, and a bicycle lane is being included in the line marking plan as consumption of that current road space utilised for parking.
So the current parking in the white lane, the parking would secure the white lane and work across to allow the cars to go past. But
Yep.
on the eastern side of the road, on the eastern side of the road, there'll be no changes to how close people can park to that intersection to improve sight lines at all.
Not contained within the submitted plans.
Thank you.
Any further questions or speakers? A question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. The representative mentioned that concept that up to 50% of traffic in the long term would not be using this egress onto St Leonard's Road, but it would in fact be using alternative ways to and from the property. I didn't see that in the report. Is there somewhere that is documented? Is it in the traffic impact assessment? I was just looking through to try and find it. Now, look, of course, we're only talking about this development. We're talking about 53 lots and a certain amount of movement onto St Leonard's Road. But if there is going to be future development on what is at the moment rural land, which will be potentially rezoned and all that sort of thing, and it is going to, some of that going to be using this road, is that quoted anywhere in the report? Because I didn't see that 50% figure anywhere. I'm just asking if that's a part of the report.
General Manager, Community and Place.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Walker. I've just conferred with planners because I'm not a planner or a traffic engineer. No, that's not contained in the body of this report. So what supports this is the transport impact assessment around this particular subdivision and the capacity to deal with the traffic generated. That being said, there are other live development applications within this area. So as a planning team, we'll look to make sure that as other developments come online, which are not related to this report, that we have a connected up community and that traffic can flow appropriately in the longer term.
Thank you. And in the traffic impact assessment, there's no sort of drawings of, there's going to be a turn right lane coming from south heading north along St Leonard's Road to turn right, and there's going to be a slip lane to turn left if you're heading south. Is that correct? Because I haven't seen...
Yeah. That's correct, Councillor Walker.
And because okay, I might just need someone to point me out where that is.
It's right at the bottom of the TIA report. There are 4 different plans.
At the bottom of the TIA?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Further question, Councillor Gibson?
Thanks so much. The question that Councillor Walker asked with regard to roads, and indeed the response that's provided by the General Manager, for me is the crux of the matter. So the standard requiring consideration at 8.6.2 pertaining to roads, where the subdivision will provide for safe, convenient and efficient connections for vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists and public transport. I totally understand how the peer-reviewed traffic assessment inclusion provides for the efficient and safe movement of the cars contained and generated within this DA. But for me, that's the it's really hard to separate, as we've heard from one of the representors, it's very hard to separate the traffic that will be created as a result of us approving this DA today, knowing that there are already challenges there, and knowing as well that there are a number of DAs to be considered into the future. So I guess what I'm asking, in terms of the reliance on performance criteria and the responses provided to that performance criteria, could you just reaffirm to us the officer's view of the peer-reviewed traffic report and how far it goes with regard to the context of what traffic is in and what traffic is out in terms of that assessment?
First thing, the traffic report hasn't been peer reviewed. However, the site is within a growth corridor. So we have engaged an external consultant and given them all the details with the proposed development, TIA report, and the subdivisions that were approved in the area, including potential subdivisions. And then even there's a draft layout in the TIA report which has been considered the overall traffic flow. The main recommendation or option from the consultant was that this is the main layout. It will be the best connectivity to future subdivisions and to the St. Leonard's Road. So there will be safe movement, and then there will be proper connectivity in regards to the traffic, vehicle movements in terms of pedestrian walking tracks along the drainage reserve and the private open space.
Sure. Any further questions or speakers? Councillor Walker.
I know that it was considered the access to St Leonard's Road 169, or whatever it is, the actual block physical address at the moment, that was considered. Was it the decision of the developer or of council, or in combination, I suppose, that wasn't to become the main access point for the development? I suppose considering that would have bypassed all the representations and all the concerns about using the cul-de-sac. And I know that there's, it's a bit of a drop down there, but nonetheless, it must have been feasible if it was considered. So at what point, and why wasn't that pursued further, I suppose? Is that a decision that council found acceptable, that you could use either one? It's not really, there's nothing to specify that one has to be used. As long as the Pinsley Avenue one is acceptable, then it's really up to the developer. Is that the case?
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
The TIA report recommended the Pinsley Drive is the best option, and even our infrastructure team, who is the road authority, they had looked into this concern. And then the constraints on the 169 St. Leonard's access, there are multiple gradients, different gradients in regards to the access to the site and the footpath, existing footpath, that there are different gradients, and there is a retaining wall right in front of the Pinsley Drive, and the access with 169 St. Leonard's Road, it's not 18 meters wide. It is 18 meters wide for the first section, and then there's a small pinch, which is only 15 meters, I believe, from the top of my head. So it's not a straight 18 meters road to have access from St. Leonard's. So there are multiple options. Like they have considered these recommendations and consider Pinsley Drive is the best safe movement for the vehicles for this subdivision.
Thank you.
I'll speak. Thank you.
To speak,
if I may,
Walker.
thank you, Chair, and thank you for all the explanations. Obviously, it's a difficult decision for council. In many ways, this complies. Nonetheless, while we can't consider future subdivisions in this decision, it would appear that there will be an impact from that future. Likewise, we can't consider the need for housing in this decision either, even if some people may wish to mention that as a reason why we should be supporting this. So the bare bones of it for me, I suppose, comes down to not so much the amount of cars moving in Pinsley Avenue, if I put that right, Drive, thank you, but it's the ingress and exit from there onto St Leonard's Road that will be you know a significant impact. And although we can't consider it in this decision, if there was a future subdivision, I would imagine the vast majority of any future housing will also be using that driveway. So, you know, what we may come to is that subdivision and this stage 2, as it's called, may have to be separated because otherwise you might find that you've got now, instead of 53 lots, we'll be looking at 191 lots. And again, I reiterate, I know that we can't consider that in this decision, and that's the most important thing to remember. But even with the 53 lots, and you know, standing on that corner last week, and knowing for all of us what St Leonard's Road is like, 70 km/h zone, irregular sort of traffic movements, and you know, morning and evening time, I can well imagine a lot busier. So getting across that intersection will be more problematic. It is absolutely no doubt. So that's what makes the decision difficult. I know we have a traffic impact assessment. It makes sure that it, you know, reiterates that it's within the tolerable sort of ability of that road to counter that much traffic. But it's having that future planning, I suppose, as far as Launceston is concerned. Some of this land needs to be rezoned, and I suppose that would come into question as well if the majority of those properties are going to be using this particular road to get to where they're going. And I would imagine most people will. I accept that point, that people aren't going to travel away from their destination. And by and large, most people living here are going to be heading to the north or to the west. They're not going to be heading south or east. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some. And that would include the current stage 2. Of course, they all have to use this single access point. If a future subdivision had been approved, if land had been rezoned, if a road had been put in already that serviced this area, I'd be far more likely to support that. But indeed, that's also going to create an alternative route for some other people who wish to get across that part of town as well. So it just keeps bringing up further issues once you look into it. I know that we encourage development, and I know that this land has been, this particular stage has been earmarked for residential development, but I think it was probably assumed that that would have come directly off St Leonard's Road via its own access, and that's what makes this decision all the more difficult, I suppose. I'm sure everyone can see the impact that it is going to have on those residents who, by rights, did buy land, you know, in a cul-de-sac, a dead-end road, thinking, well, that's not going to change. Even if they are surrounded by undeveloped land, they would reasonably expect that that undeveloped land was not going to be using their intersection and their road, because those lands all have their own access. So that's what makes the decision difficult, I suppose. I can see that there would be other ways to approach it. They might be more costly, but having its own access, of course, would completely mitigate that problem. So I'm still undecided as to how I'm going to vote, and I'd certainly like to hear any conclusions that other councillors have drawn.
Councillor Walker. A couple of further questions. Councillor Gibson, then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I don't have a conclusion yet, but I do have a question, and that is, we obviously took a general manager offline for 6 months to do a lot of work in this space with regard to the urban planning of St Leonard's. So what did that work determine in terms of the nature of roads and specifically the nature and regard for St Leonard's Road proper in terms of moving forward with regard to this being an area of growth and a kind of a guiding document? Noting, of course, that hasn't been endorsed, but what were the learnings that were determined during that 6-month body of work?
Thank you, Councillor Gibson.
Sorry, point of order. Could we find the microphone, please, for the General Manager to be able to use? Is that okay? We don't need to have people kneeling for councillors' questions. Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
That's better.
Thanks, Councillor Gibson. It's going to be difficult for any of us to really speak intricately to that body of work that was undertaken, but what I will say, it has produced a draft road layout plan that does include the collector road that was mentioned by one of the speakers today. I guess what the council officers are using that draft plan to ensure that the connectivity and that Pinsley Drive is not going to end up as being the one thoroughfare onto St Leonard's Road. So, yeah.
I might just add, Councillor Gibson, thank you for the question. So the body of work that General Manager Newby refers to is also the basis for the work we'll now be building on that through the grant we've received through the Housing Support Program. So the aim of that body of work is to complete a master plan and in addition to an infrastructure funding framework. Once those pieces of work are complete, and that is going to be done in the next 12 months because that's the funding deed the federal government's given us, we'll be in a good position to come back to the council, present you with that master plan and associated other things for you to review. And the hope then is that we'll be able to adopt or endorse, I'm not sure of the correct language around that particular master plan, so that as development occurs in the growth corridor in line with the Northern Regional Land Use Strategy and the GLP, which first identified this as a good place for expansion of housing, we'll have a plan that all developers can reference when they bring their housing online there.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what I also heard you infer is that even though it hasn't been endorsed yet and the body of work hasn't been completed, certainly this development application has been considered, and whilst not formally assessed in line with it, certainly cognisant of it. Yeah, which is great. Is that the case?
Correct, Councillor Gibson.
Fits in. Deputy Mayor, question?
Yeah, just thank you. Just further on to a comment made by Councillor Walker, just a hypothetical, that if further subdivision was made off the current subdivision without a connector road, would the confluence of further traffic on Pinsley Drive then be subject to review in relation to the approval of that subdivision? Does that make sense?
Yes,
yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Any further questions? A question?
Yeah, all I see when it comes to St Leonard's Road is a widening of the road, let's say heading north along in St Leonard's Road, not an actually dedicated turn right lane, but a sweeping section of road. Would that be a correct assessment, or is there a specific turn right only lane? Because all I can see is a sweeping width of the road, which tends to allow a car to pass on the inside of a car that's indicating to turn right, but not a specific turn right lane.
These lines are not dedicated for turn right or turn left. They have been, they will be line marked accordingly to have that enough room when you're turning towards Pinsley Drive. The width will be maintained opposite of Pinsley Drive with a 1.2 meter bicycle lane. And then there's a 6 meter width from the bicycle lane to the center of the line, so which allows for the right turn vehicles to stay in the middle of the line, and then the other vehicles can pass through within that 6 meter. so there's enough room on the opposite side of Pinsley Drive.
I think this is also responded to as part of issue 7 in the representations.
But just to be clear, there's not a dedicated turn right lane.
So just while they're working with the screens, issue 7 response is the TIA states that a strict adoption of the Aus Roads warrants would require a basic left BAL brackets treatment and a short channelized right treatment of St Leonard's Road. Recognising these constraints that exist and that a full detailed design has not been undertaken, a lower order treatment, being an urban basis left and the urban basic right, are considered acceptable given the greater network planning.
Another question, Councillor Harris?
Yes, I do. And I don't wish to answer the question, but I think the description given by the General Manager would describe Elfin Road turning into Dowling Street exactly as that. There is no right-hand arrow. However, cars can sort of queue to turn right because of oncoming traffic. Cars can go round the turning car because there's no parking allowed and the bike lane continues. My question is actually about Pinder Drive, which is 15 metre wide allotment for the road width. And we then go into the new road, which will go up to the subdivision, which is in an 18 metre wide part of the subdivision. And the road itself will be 8.9 metres wide. Now, the problem we're being led to believe with this particular plan was that it was considered better to come off the 15 metre wide road reserve of Pinder Drive, which is 6 metres of curb to curb, rather than using a 18 metre wide road reserve off St Leonard's Road, where it pinches to 15 metres, which is actually the same width as all of Pinder Drive is from fence to fence. And so what else made using a smaller road reserve of only 15 metres more suitable than a road that had 18 metres that was going to pinch to 15? I'm just struggling with that logic that says it's better to use this road. It's not like the 18 metres was being pinched to 9 when perhaps I could make more sense of it, but it's only being pinched to 15 metres. So is there any information that can be perhaps given to us to understand why Pinder Drive was seeming to be a better option, other than obviously there's the steepness, and I do get that, and perhaps rock might also be involved, making a more costly access onto the road. But it's doing my head in about the 15 metres and only having a road 6 metres wide, that it's then when it gets up to feed the new subdivision, that road's going to be 9 metres wide, even with the parking bays, and it's just illogical. So can anyone answer why that was the case and what was the basis of it?
Can you please repeat the question? Thinking of also opening up.
Yeah. I think issue 4 under the representations really deals with this. So the ratio, these are all very long words. The ratio transport impact assessment has identified that this location is not acceptable for the following reasons. It is located only 120 metres north of the existing Pinsley Drive intersection and would increase the density along this arterial road corridor, which is generally undesirable. There is a significant level difference at this location, as evidenced by the retaining walls, which grade separates existing driveways from the footpath on St Leonard's Road. Construction of an appropriate intersection would be difficult and cost prohibitive and may impact on driveway access to neighbouring properties. The access strip is not a full 18 metres wide in a straight line into the property. There is a pinch point of around 15 metres. As such, a fully standards compliant through road may not be constructed without acquisition of part of the neighbouring property. Based on the above, the proposed access via Pinsley Drive is considered the best option for access to the site until the broader St Leonard's Road network is completed in conjunction with other developments. Council's infrastructure and engineering team support this position.
Thank you for that response. But couldn't remember the finer details. But when you said about the retaining walls, it came back to me. Thank you for that. I have no further questions.
To speak, Councillor Harris?
Unless anyone else wants questions. Nope. Okay.
Councillor Harris to speak. As the seconder.
So I will, in fact, speak as the seconder and say that I do rise to support this motion today. As you can tell, I had some concerns about Pinsley Drive being used as the access for this subdivision, and as others have said, it may well be the access for this subdivision and other developments beyond it until the whole network comes together. But having said that, a little bit like the discussion we just had about what will the turning lane look like, there are other examples of this around the city. One that springs to my mind is Risley Street in Kings Meadows with its parking bays on what was probably once a quiet residential street, but now very much a collector road. Not quite a collector road, the other term.
Race car track.
Race car track, yes. But certainly a road that will have more traffic on it than the residents of Risley Street probably envisaged when they may have bought their house there some years ago. Change is inevitable, and as has been said before, it sounds like the engineering report suggests this is the best way to unlock this land, and I'm happy with the science to be applied, and so I'll be supporting it here today for us to, and I hope my fellow councillors join me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any further speakers around the table? Councillor Dawkins?
Just briefly, not to be going over old ground, but I do see this treatment for this concern around Pinsley Drive and St Leonard's actually having an incidental impact of slowing traffic. That's kind of the nature of those turns. So yes, there's 60 and 70 either side of this area, but I do believe that this kind of treatment will actually have that chilling effect, which is, in my mind, a good thing.
Thanks, Councillor Dawkins. A question, Councillor Walker?
I have already spoken, so one more question, if I may. So to be clear, I'm putting this as a question. Someone could come along from the south, heading north, indicate to turn right. The car behind is now accelerating to 70 kilometres an hour, sees that car indicating, swings into the cycle lane to go past it on the inside and continue heading north. That's the scenario that potentially we're creating. Would that be an incorrect assessment of the scenario?
I don't feel comfortable answering hypotheticals on the basis that I'm not a traffic engineer.
Well, it's not hypothetical, it's just interpreting what's there on the map, which is that someone will come to a stop to turn right and block the main normal thoroughfare, but there is a lane that swings on the inside left, heading north, that has to cross the bike lane if it wishes to get around that car.
The road is being widened and the bike lane is moving in to the left. To the bottom of the image on screen. Right. So that will allow room in this hypothetical scenario.
There's 1.2 metres there of bike lane.
And then 6 metres from the bike lane to the centre of the line. And then 3 metres on the other.
Yeah. With no parking. Yeah. No, I can see that, but I would have thought that depending, the distance from the 1.2 metre of the bike lane to now there'll be no other line sort of to delineate 2 lanes of traffic. We have 6 metres and then 1.2 metres. I can see that, but no sort of dedicated lanes or anything like that other than, I suppose, a white line or yellow line for the bike lane. Thank you.
Further speakers? Deputy Mayor to close.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's very similar to what happens on Elfin Road at Dowling Street. There is a bike lane there and people do sweep out and do that, but hopefully they're driving sensibly and looking at what's there, which they need to because there's a bike lane. Look, thank you everybody for your contribution. And again, thank you for the representative and the comments which are giving us very real concerns that they've got because they use it every day. So I think it's really important to note that. I think this is an evolving space, the whole St Leonard's area. We've got a plan. The connector road hopefully will come in sooner rather than later and actually take some of the traffic away from this particular road. We've had an independent traffic assessment done on the road which says it's safe and it's able to be used in conjunction with this subdivision. There's been treatment is going to be provided in Pinsley Drive. I've heard it called that many things this afternoon. I think it's Pinsley Drive, Pinder Street, Pinder Avenue and whatever, but Pinsley Drive, where they're going to indent parking spaces to enable cars to be off the road, which is actually a safer way of parking as well, which means that the through traffic can go both ways. So I think there's been a lot of work there, and even at the T-junction I know that it'll change some treatment to some of the residences there, but it'll actually push them back and they'll just come back onto a road like a normal frontage. At the moment it just comes out into the corner of the subdivision. So I think that all of the matters that need to be dealt with have been dealt with. I think there's been adequate explanation as to why 169 St Leonard's Road is not the appropriate space. That's been assessed by an independent road traffic person to tell us why Pinsley Drive is a better location for that. As I said in my opening remarks, I hope that this is something we have under continued review because this place is starting to busy up in regards to what we're going to be doing out there, and we owe it to the residents of today and the residents of tomorrow to ensure that the road traffic management along that road is the best that it can be for future subdivision to make the new St Leonard's something that we can really be proud of.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Putting to the vote then, all of those in favour? Those against? So Councillor Walker against, all other councillors in the room in favour. The motion is carried. At 9.2, we have 181, 83, 85, 87, 89, 91, 93 Westbury Road and 60 Oakton Road in Prospect from the low density residential zone to the general residential zone. Before we get to the recommendation, I don't have any speakers that have been noted from the public. And I don't think we have any public left. There being none, we will move forward to the recommendation. That Council notifies the Tasmanian Planning Commission that no representations were received during the public exhibition period for the amendment and that the amendment be approved and certified and exhibited. Somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Harris. A seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the final part of the process that we go to rezone land from low density residential to general residential. No complaints or responses were received to our advertising of it, and it's probably because it seems to make good sense to rezone this land to allow more housing to be developed on that land rather than the slightly lower density housing zone in an area that is, I guess, requiring more suitable land for housing, and I think the densification is certainly within the capabilities of the land and the infrastructure around it to be able to be absorbed. So quite happy that we're finally sending this off down to the planning appeals people for this to become the change and the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. The second to Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, just briefly, almost the final step, of course, sending our recommendation for approval to the Commission. Important to note the process has been had and that, as Councillor Harris said, no representations, which, is one indication that there is community support, but importantly for me, the planning strategies and documents support the justification, and it's with that that I'll be supporting the recommendation again today.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any other further speakers? Councillor Walker?
Yes, quite happy to stand to support this rezoning as we did earlier before it was sent to the Planning Commission. Now it remains for this to be ratified by the Planning Commission and, of course, the DA to be lodged so that we can see the ingress and access to the block at a future date on busy Westbury Road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Further speakers or questions? Anything to close, Councillor Harris?
Nothing further to add.
Excellent. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 9.3, we have 325 Watery Plains Road, White Hills Planning Scheme Amendment, rezone from agricultural zone to rural zone. I don't believe we have any public speakers, so we'll go to the recommendation, which is that council agrees to initiate this amendment to the Launceston Local Provisions Schedule to rezone land and agrees to apply the priority vegetation component of the Natural Values Code to part of the site. At 2, it certifies that the draft amendment and it is determining the period for public exhibition be 28 days. Somebody to move. Councillor Walker. Seconder. Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And this is an interesting rezoning, indeed a very interesting little corner in our municipality. This rezoning comes about because at present it is zoned agricultural, and yet a large balance of the land does in fact have a covenant on it, an existing protection of the environment there. The application to rezone it as rural does mean that there will be additional uses for the property that you would not be able to do if it remained agricultural. But nonetheless, indeed, it does actually give that opportunity to extend the protections and the natural values of the land, which is an important part of this. Not to say that that is the reason that this is being done, but that is a consequence of that rezoning. It does gain more protection. We're not to know the motivation behind the owner for asking for this rezoning, but it does mean that it could be used for other rural pursuits, whether it's in tourism, accommodation and all sorts of other things that could be used on this site. And I did begin by saying that it's an interesting site because, of course, this is the confluence of 2 rivers, the North Esk and the St Patrick's River. And it is also not very far from a major part of Launceston's water supply, just upstream from there, in fact. So I know this motion did come to council a couple of weeks ago, but because there were a number of anomalies in that initial motion, which I discussed with council officers, it was withdrawn and it has come back now with corrections to its right-of-way access, corrections to the services that are available to that block, and thirdly, no, there was another thing, but there was the documentation was missing out of our agenda in actual fact, so it wasn't possible for councillors to be able to investigate any further. But it has come back to us. It is a very straightforward matter. It does provide more protections for that land, and I wish the owner well in their endeavours for that particular site.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Another question, Councillor Harris.
I did have a question, and to a degree, Councillor Walker might have answered it. I was curious what the difference was between the 2 zonings of agriculture and rural. And I guess a subsequent question was, did we initiate this change, or has it come from the landowner himself or herself to make the change? Because when I looked at it, I couldn't really see why there'd need to be a change. But perhaps tourism use was one that I hadn't considered.
Did we initiate it or did they?
Sure. So the agriculture zone is primarily designed for like the substantial agricultural estate in our municipality. The rural zone is also an agriculture zone, but it allows for more permitted uses. So it allows more flexibility, I guess, for sort of rural uses which are compatible with agriculture, but it just provides that additional diversity.
Did they ask for it?
The applicant was 60 degrees, so we received the application and we're assessing it. Yes, yeah.
And just with the permission of the mover and the seconder, we just want to make a quick amendment to the recommendation part 1. Section 40D should be section 37. If that's okay, Councillor Walker and Councillor Pentridge, with your permission. Okay, we'll continue. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Your Honour, well, Your Honour. Going back
Not quite yet.
Just for the high esteem that I see you in. No, I think that my colleague here has obviously done a lot of homework, or enough homework, and I'm satisfied with everything he said. So I'll be supporting it. And thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Any further speakers from the table? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I think it's also relevant. There's a couple of other little comments in there. It does open up more use for the land, but I think the other thing which is also poignant is that the natural values on the site will be better protected by the proposed change to recognise the values recognised in the Conservation Covenant. So in many respects, the major purpose for the land is actually strengthened as a result of going to a rural reckoning, and I think the ability for them to use the site that's not being used for those natural values for something else and maybe might be a better use for the land.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Further speakers or questions? Councillor Walker to close.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is certainly does open up, potential further uses for the land, but at the same time, it can still be used for those agricultural pursuits as well. So it's a sort of a win-win as far as the owner goes. Indeed, there's an assessment there of its agricultural value, which is quite low. It's rocky. There are large areas which are protected under that existing covenant. And of course, it still maintains its water rights, depending on whether the North Esk irrigation scheme becomes viable or not. The property could, potentially also benefit from those water rights, whether it's zoned agricultural or zoned rural. So, like I said in opening, I just wish the owner well, and having a large portion of Launceston's water coming through their property, I'm sure they'll enjoy it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Into 9.4 now, a planning scheme amendment. The properties onto the local heritage list and new database. No public speakers for this, so moving to the recommendation. This is the one with 40D. So recommendation that council agrees to and initiates amendments to the Launceston Local Provision Schedule to A, insert 11 property database sheets for existing listings, the local historic heritage code data sheets, and B, adds 38 new properties to the local heritage listings within the local heritage places. At C, creates 38 new data sheets. And D, introduces 38 new properties into the local heritage listing, which is on the provided agenda. Somebody to move. Councillor Walker, seconded by Councillor Kai. Councillor Walker.
Certainly, if I could start with some questions, if I may. First of all, if you can explain where to from here. This is an initial sort of listing, and there'll be a process by which we go through publicly and otherwise. So yeah, just if it's not too much, to just briefly explain that to the table.
Thank you, General Manager Leanne.
Sure. So this is what we're doing today is initiating if it is voted that way. From here, it will proceed to 28 days on public notification. So that would occur likely within the next fortnight. We've then received any comments or any representation, and we will create from there another report, which is called a 40K report, which is one you've just previously voted on today. That will address any concerns or issues raised in any representations, or it will make it clear that none were provided. From there, that report is then endorsed and it's sent through to the Tasmanian Planning Commission, who may elect to hold hearings depending if there are representations or how they, how they want to approach the amendment. Then finally from there, they'll make a decision.
And just secondly, for clarity, why are there two lists, one's with 11 and one with 38? Was that just a matter of how it happened, or is there a difference between them in any shape or form?
So the 11 are already listed. They just didn't have a data sheet. So, yeah.
Further questions or to speak?
To speak, if I may. Thank you. Just to open, this is a fantastic moment for Launceston. We do say progress with prudence here, but I would say progress with purpose is probably more to the case for our city, third oldest city in Australia, an abundance of heritage of various different ages, and that can be noted in the listings here today. Properties, industrial properties from the 1920s, Art Deco buildings from the 1930s, and bungalows from the 1940s, as well as Federation properties that over 100 years old now. Probably less so the colonial era, because a lot of those are already protected by state or local provisions. This is to add properties that no longer have protection under either of the state or local codes, and that has come about through a series of changes, through the adoption of the statewide planning scheme, and Launceston Council has been in the process of assessing both precincts and individual properties with the stated aim of affording more protection for those things that we value. And why do we value them? Because we are a heritage city. It's what makes us different. We might be the third oldest city, but in terms of our heritage, we're probably the most contiguous city in this country. It's something that sets us apart from most other places in Australia, something that we can be justifiably proud of, but also something that we need to work together to protect, to maintain into the future, and to celebrate, most importantly, as a community. This is just a part of that process. In some ways, this is low-hanging fruit. These are listings that people have readily agreed, owners have readily agreed that their property is appropriate that it is afforded those protections. But there are many, many more in this city, and we've seen in the last few years, in fact, very recently, we've seen properties that have been demolished or earmarked for demolition that we do have an interest in. It's just that interest hasn't been officially processed. And it takes time, and I do congratulate our Heritage Officer, Jess Horton, in putting together the detailed data sheets. And I'd encourage anyone listening to have a look at one or two of them, because the amount of work, the amount of research that goes into it, the justification, that's a really important part of getting a property listed. And there will be some people listening who own a property who don't want to see it listed, who believe that it's their property, they can do what they like with it. Well, I'm here standing today to say I would like to speak to anyone who has that attitude, and I would like to encourage them to think of it as part of our collective heritage, part of our community spirit, part of what makes Launceston special in the national context. And that is something that I will continue to encourage. I know that we are doing work on heritage precincts. Cemetery Street has recently been added to our local provisions. I know there's work being done on other precincts, but there is still a large body of work to be done on perhaps 1,000 properties in this town that if you or I looked at would think that property will be protected, and you'll find that that property is not protected. When it comes to different styles and different tastes, we've probably all got our favourite things architecturally, but this is not what that's about. This is about the community fabric, our historical European colonial to modern day fabric. So that means that buildings like Henty House just across the way, a 1970s brutalist modernist building, is also listed. It means that the LBS Bank for Savings halfway along Invermay Road, an Art Deco building, is now in the process of being listed. Or the Smith factory down in near King's Wharf on Forster Street. No, maybe Gletto Street. Not sure. I think Glenelg Street, is also now being nominated for listing, because these are buildings that, the Launceston would be poorer for not having. And I will make one last mention of a building that, I'm not even sure if it's still standing, but the James Nelson building that was recently approved for demolition because it's not listed, even though it was identified by this council through a report that was done in 2007 as being a significant part of Launceston's architectural history, was not protected and could not be protected because this process hasn't been followed through. If I could just finish, or ask for an extension.
Continue.
If I could just finish by saying, now,
All those in favour of Councillor Walker, that's all councillors present.
if I could just finish by saying that these buildings are significant, like I say, nationally, but they're also significant locally. I've met people who worked in that James Nelson building. It's a part of our fabric. And while we can't protect every building, and indeed that is not the intent of this listing, what we can do is protect unique examples throughout our history and in reasonable number, not in isolation. They need to have some context in which they remain. And that James Nelson building, in that location, could have been, in another world, incorporated into a new design, and we could have had the best of both worlds. And that's quite often what can be an outcome in these situations if we can all work together. So I would encourage people who are the owners of these properties to work with council, work with the community, and let's make Launceston a place of purpose, not just prudence. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Now we'll go to Councillor Kai as the seconder, then continue with the questions. So Councillor Kai.
I will be supporting this planning scheme amendment, and Councillor Walker has given abundance of reasons why we should support this, so I don't need to get into that. A lot of time and hard work has been spent into getting this local heritage list and new data sheet done by both our former heritage officer Fiona Ransom and our new heritage officer Jess Horton. I'd like to thank Jess and all the council officers for the mammoth amount of work for getting to this stage, and I highly recommend my fellow councillors to support to initiate and exhibit this amendment to Launceston Local Provision Schedule of the Tasmanian Planning Scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. So some questions. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. Yes, look, my question, when it was brought up by Councillor Walker in his talk, why he was supporting this, and I just want to ask about a couple of properties, one of which is listed as 25 Glendew Street. The picture of that as a house is a wonderful, probably 1930s, I think, brick house. However, when you expand to the streetscape, the rest of it's warehouses. And so it sits there isolated. And I just wanted to hear the Heritage Office's thoughts on when we have that already happened, is it too late to then put a overlay on that house when if it was in a row of others that would have been there opposite the, what's now the Door of Hope, but the original Kate Payton's mill, there were probably a whole row of houses along those streets. And so the opportunity has been gone. And what's the thinking behind why we should still list this house when it stands in isolation rather than as part of a precinct?
So the listing process, we look at 7 different criteria. And so it really only needs to fulfill one criteria in the local context to be able to reach that level. But I do understand what you're saying, and that's why we're moving to that precinct approach, which is more widespread protection of streetscapes. Because, yeah, I completely agree with you. When the context is lost, it is a loss for heritage as well. But yeah, that property fulfills all 7 criteria, which is why we still go ahead with the listing.
Thank you. The second one I had a question on was 43 Penquite Road, which is probably our own property. It was a bus shelter or tram shelter, I suspect, built of brick on the front of 43 Penquite Road, and probably with a toilet, I suspect, for the driver down underneath. And that's as far as the tram or buses went. It's no longer the case. It's now a busy intersection where Robin Street comes out onto the Penquite Road, and the bus stops have been moved further up the street. Currently, it has a roller door over what was the bus shelter, probably to stop people from, living in it. Yes, that's right. Got lots of other things. And again, I wonder, what is the use of protecting this particular building? Whilst I do agree architecturally, it's quite interesting, but to have it shut off with just a roller door is all you see from the street, is that worthy of being retained in that space? And what constraints does that put on the future? Does that mean then that never can this be knocked down? And so therefore the property owner, who I assume owns the rest of 43 Penquite Road, and we've probably only bought the front corner, he's always going to have this brick edifice sort of sitting there in his front corner, regardless of what it is. And whilst I do agree it's very important for the time that it was there, but it is something that I just wonder what was behind the listing of this. Is it the last one? I did, having been a resident of West Launceston, think, oh, there's another one down at Basin Road. But a Google search couldn't see that that was still there. Maybe it is hiding in the trees somewhere, but it did seem like perhaps it could be the last one. But I would look to the officer's response to that.
It may very well be the last one. I may have missed another one. Don't quote me on that, but I believe the owner uses it for storage or a garage or something along those lines. So it does have a use at the moment. The reason, again, we keep it is because it's extremely rare in Launceston. It's either the last one or one of a few remaining bus shelters or tram shelters. And they're, like you said, 1930s, 1920s construction. And again, it fulfills all the criteria. And then in regard to your question about demolition, demolition is a discretionary item under the code, I believe. I'll let the planners step in if they need to. And so if you desperately needed it demolished, it wouldn't be an absolute no. There are always caveats with the planning scheme. So,
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins and Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. I do have a question around initiating and exhibiting the amendment, but I do have a preamble. My house is on one of those lists. Now, I didn't step out because the only pecuniary interest really is how ridiculously hard I've had to work to save that house. So I don't believe there's a conflict here. But when I talk to people about this, and I talk to my family and neighbours about what they thought, and I live near, I've got a builder and an architect living near me, the general sense is still that being put on any list is restrictive. People either ignored it or actively did not participate because they thought it was going to restrict their premises and what they could do with it. So the previous question actually goes to answering that. So I think it's really important when you exhibit this amendment that you add something from the FAQs here around that, because people, I think, need to know that it doesn't mean they can't develop their land, they can make changes, they just have to go through the normal council processes to make sure the council know what they're up to and approve it. So could that be included, please, in that advertisement?
Yes, so we, for the owners that we are moving forward with their listing, they have access to a Tomorrow Together page, and it has very specific information. It even has an explainer video that discusses everything you've just said. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Gibson?
Thank you. My question, or contribution rather, is along the lines of what Councillor Dawkins said, because for me, one of the great things about the Sunday Examiner is the inclusion of pieces from the Launceston Historical Society, which educate and share with us the nature of what has gone before us, and in some cases how we are living with, using, celebrating and interacting with living heritage today. And many of these properties which are being added to the list, are examples of living heritage. You can still do things with them, you can still preserve, you can still work with, you can still renovate, you can still enhance. And we saw when the Heritage Awards were in play, we would recognise some properties that were able to renovate and recreate and reimagine parts of their property with regard to the heritage and preserve and celebrate the heritage. So 2 points. The first point is I too want to really congratulate Jess on a huge body of work that's been undertaken quickly, sequentially, in a way that embraces community and gets on with the job. And we've been asking for a number of years for that to occur, and you've done an outstanding job, so well done. The other thing is I think it is really appropriate for us, and Councillor Walker kind of indicated the need for us to do this more in his introduction, to really go hard in celebrating the role that heritage has played and continues to play in identifying our city. Those data sets, those data sheets, I mean, there's kind of 49 Sunday Examiner pages right there, just waiting to be included in a series for the next 49 weeks. As we begin to celebrate heritage. And of course, there's lots of privacy implications and whatever, but I reckon the extension of that Tomorrow Together portal page is a page that really celebrates heritage on the council's website, that unpacks this great body of work that we've been waiting for so many years for, that of course speaks to the ways that you can still develop and enhance your property, but more so speaks to the nature of Launceston's heritage and how that plays a role for our city continuing to move forward. So I stood simply to say that this has been a long time coming, but Jess, you've done an incredible job and we look forward to it continuing to evolve. And we look forward to residents continuing to engage, because this isn't the end of the story. These data sheets continue to evolve over the next 50 years, next 60 years, next 100 years. It's a living document, as is the nature, I think, of the way that we should be looking at heritage in our city. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gibson. Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Mayor. This won't be the first time or last time I'll say this today, but we are Australia's third oldest city, and I think we need to treat that with the sort of properties that we have. I give us a tick and a cross in this process. The tick is we're here today, so well done, Jess and the team, to pull this together and get the number of data sheets that we've got out there. The cross is that we've actually been looking at this since 2007. The Paul Davies report enunciated things, and I know that a number of us have sat around and dealt with demolitions of properties that were articulated in Paul Davies' report many years back, and they're no longer with us. And I know Councillor Walker is, in recent times there's been a number of buildings that are no longer with us as a result of the fact that they weren't listed in any way, shape or form. So I think that it's a pity, but having seen and understood the depth of work that needs to be done to make this happen, I can understand why it's taken a long time. And I know we've had to employ resources outside of council to get there. Since 2014, I think I was involved back in the Heritage Advisory Committee. The precinct planning thing, I think, is a better way to overcome a lot of that. We can get into it a lot quicker and cover a larger tract of land. So I think it's a really good outcome that we've got to today. I guess the question you have is when you see, I think it was 810 that didn't respond to the letters that went out. I can also understand why they haven't done that, but I'd have to say probably our communications at the time wasn't that great either, because I don't think the number of phone calls that I fielded understood what the letter was actually about. So again, if we're going back to the well to ask them again whether they'd like to consider it, some of the things that have been said around the table today is to articulate that better in the responses that we're requesting from them, because I think some people, it's easier to say nothing because nothing will change then. If I say something, as Councillor Dawkins said, that might put a restriction or something on me, or that fear for that going forward. But we shouldn't be fearful of actually protecting what's so important to us and what makes Launceston what it is today. And so I'm really thrilled that this has come today. It might not be a huge body of the properties that are on that list, but it's some. and it's 3 or 4, or 30 or 40 that are now going to be in a position where they're better protected going into the future. So I'm delighted to support the motion today. I'd like to see the precincts, I'd like to see everything moving faster, and I appreciate, Jess, you've only got 2 legs and you can only run as fast as you can. But time is ticking, because another property that we saw last year will come up again that we won't be able to help or save because there's nothing there to protect it. So that's my only sort of cautionary concerns with it, but I'm delighted that we're supporting these ones as well.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Pentridge.
Just a quick question to start off with. We mentioned that there are over 800 people who haven't responded to the letters, and you then mentioned something about a website. Can you just give us that website address, and can anyone who thought they might have got a letter be able to go online to see whether their property was one of those that had been identified?
Yes, so the website is accessed via QR code at the moment. So we can definitely forward that so you can have a look. And then if your property has been, basically what I'm doing is doing informal consultation ahead of any new amendment. So any property that is on that list, they can all be reassured that they will be contacted ahead of every amendment via letter, unless we think of a quicker, easier way to do that, obviously. And was that the full question? Apologies. Yeah.
I thank you for that. And I guess really what I was going to do was going to call on the 800 people who perhaps got the letter, threw it in the rubbish tin, didn't open it because they were afraid then, as Councillor Mackenzie said, if I didn't read it, it didn't happen. And perhaps, we could even have the QR code reposted somewhere in the newspaper or otherwise, so that people are able to perhaps go and check to see whether their properties were listed. And if so, and if they are, as Councillor Dawkins is, happy for their property to be listed, then they can make contact with you, because I'm sure you'd rather have happy people coming in the door at you saying, yes, I'm happy for you to proceed to doing a data sheet, rather than having people who want to not have their property listed that might have been identified. Like the others, I too have been waiting for this for a long time. I am very much aware that many of the properties that were listed were virtually pre-federation in previous planning schemes. And so all of the 1930s and 1950s architecture is unlisted. It's good to see a couple of commercial buildings in there on Wellington Street, and also some other properties around, but there are so many more that are deserving. And certainly with people that I talk to that come to the city, they can't believe how good the architecture is, and that we've done a wonderful job in preserving it, when in actual fact we've only preserved it through dumb luck. And it is very much an effort that we need to go forward to preserve more of the good examples of early architecture. And by early, it's right up until probably 20 years ago. There are properties that might well have been more recently built, certainly even this century, that probably deserve to be on that list because they have been architecture designed, and as such will be part of our future heritage that people will come along to have a look at. So very happy to support the work. I want to thank Jess for her work to get it to this point, and also Fiona, who was here before doing that role. But I do call out to the residents who've had those letters. Perhaps now's the time to start contacting council, so that we can hopefully have your property listed in here in another 6 months' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Pentridge.
Disappointingly, Councillor Harris has stolen some of my thunder, but he's made, really, or this occasion, he's made some good points. There's a couple of things I need to correct my Deputy Mayor. Launceston is the oldest city. The other two were penal colonies. So we are the oldest city in Australia. And it wouldn't hurt to, some of us to be a bit more positive. Secondly, with Jess, I also agree with, I don't agree with our Deputy Mayor about that you can't run any faster. You need to run faster, because when you look at the numbers, 815 people couldn't be bothered responding. Let's not give up on it. As we've all indicated, or as my colleague here said, maybe they didn't see it, didn't know. We've still got a lot of work to do. And if you look at our statistics, it is a bit disappointing in that 815 people didn't bother. 141 people were pretty clear that they didn't like the idea. 73 people needed some more information. Anyway, in the total, it's 109 people who really, at the end of the day, agreed. We have got a lot of work to do, so let's keep doing it. So I'm more than happy to contribute to a new pair of running shoes. And I don't agree with the comment that people should approach us. I think this needs to be, I know we are all genuine about what we're saying about our city. We've got to keep approaching them. We've got to keep selling it. So I don't want to be throwing compliments around. It's not something I really like doing. But yeah, you've done a half reasonable job. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments or questions around the table? Councillor Walker, close.
Thank you, and I just did take a few notes when people were commenting. I've always said, since I've come to this establishment, that there's three things that make our city special, and that is the Tamar Kanamaluka River, it's our lifestyle that we get to enjoy, and it is our built heritage. And while we are doing many things when it comes to the Tamar and Kanamaluka, and hopefully doing many more soon, our lifestyle, I suppose, we take for granted in some ways, even though we all enjoy it. And likewise, our heritage, I think we're surrounded by so much that we do tend to take it for granted. It's other people, when relatives, friends come here, we meet tourists who come here, they're the ones that tell us what a special thing we have. They're the ones that walk around with their mouths open, looking at all the different examples of our built heritage. So we probably do have a job, and I thank Councillor Pentridge for mentioning it, that we do have to sell it. We do have to educate ourselves, and that has to be positive. That can't be telling people, you must do this, you must do that. It has to be that we offer something to the people who are involved in this process, the owners of these buildings. We can't be just waving a stick. We need the carrot as well. And what is that? It's recognition, partially. It's assistance in people maintaining these properties, because they can be very expensive depending on what it is. There's all sorts of things that can be done. And that education process, I know that does go on, and not everyone is interested in these things, but this is what makes Launceston special. It is one of those things that is integral to who we are. And so that's why I say progress with purpose. We need that direction. We need to know who we are and to celebrate who we are. When it comes to 43 Panquite Road that Councillor Harris, through you, Chair, mentioned, it so happens that was designed by the Launceston City Engineer and Building Surveyor, William Potts, appointed to the Launceston Council in 1930. Just a small, innocuous building, but it brings great pleasure when you see something like that. And to think that it is on someone's private property, they do look after it. It is, in functioning, roofed, maintainable state. And that's all it needs sometimes. Just to know that it's there, that it's being looked after, that's all that it needs. But there are other buildings where it becomes far more complex, where money has to be spent by the owner. So this next stage that we will go to will be harder, because it can't extend, but I will just finish by saying that this next stage will be harder, because we do need to work with people if we're to bring them along on that journey. And so that's what I encourage the council to do, to sell this story, not just to our own community, but to the rest of the country. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. So putting it to the vote then, all of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. And council no longer sits as planning authority. As we move into announcements by the Mayor, they're published in the agenda at agenda item 10 and 10.1. Councillor reports at 11. Who would like to provide some councillor reports? I've got Deputy Mayor, Councillor Kai, Councillor McMahon and Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I did note in your mayoral announcements the fact that I attended as guest speaker at the Heritage Forest Community Garden. It was fantastic to go up there, and it was a permaculture, which was done by Joe Dean ceremony, and it was absolutely fantastic up there with 8 or a dozen people who have just been designing their backyards to put permanent food forests and things like that in there and make their land so much more usable from the point of view of community and themselves. And I think it's a terrific thing that's being done. So it was a very worthy thing to attend. In addition, last week in your absence, not that I only went because I was the acting mayor, but I also attended former Alderman Annette Waddle's funeral across at the Boathouse, along with Councillor Pentridge. That was more for personal reasons than any other reason. It was a fantastic celebration of her life and how important council was to that life. She was, I think, 25 years on the council, so I think it was a fantastic, and I know the family really appreciated the time that she gave to the city, and the love she had for her husband John was just so evident in regards to the conversations that went on. So it was just a lovely farewell to a person who served her city very, very well. I also attended last Friday the 25th Symposium of Australian Gastronomy, which was at the Design Centre, the welcoming dinner, or the welcoming workshops and conversations, which was absolutely fantastic, and was really great to hear that it was 115 people, I think, from around the world and around Australia came along to that conversation last week, and the conference went through Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, I think, so there were lots of plenary sessions that went on, and from what I've heard were very, very good and well attended. So that was just a little thing that comes off the back of what you did in Phuket, I guess, but it's just something which is really building the conversation about what we do as a gastronomy city. Also, like you, I attended the NAIDOC ceremony at the Tas Aboriginal Centre earlier in the week, and that was again another poignant conversation that we have with the Aboriginal people, explaining to them about the importance of what their heritage is to us, and I guess also giving us a whack every now and then about the things that they think still are important that are not being done, and that's also appropriate there as well. And the other thing I'll sign off, and we may have already said this a couple of weeks ago, but I think today might be Nettie Burr's last day up at the Starting Point Neighbourhood House. I think she leaves after a long period of time working up there, and she's been fantastic for that community, so wishing her well in her future endeavours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Pentridge and Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. There's a couple of points, like first, Winston Churchill, sick of quoting him, but it did come up. Remember, he wasn't my most favourite human being, so I'm not quoting him for any other reason, but he did say that those of us that forget our past have no future. The things that we've brought up here today, and that Waddle, she was a very hard-working individual, and it was good to be part of it, and it was a good turnout. Our heritage buildings, which is our past, right? And then, without going into the big long list of things, we have got another one that's still alive, someone that's come to Australia a long time ago, and we are the city of gastronomy, right? Good food, and I appreciate Albert Auditorium will turn 90 in the next few days. He's been a restaurateur in this city for a long time. And I suppose one should quit when one's ahead, but he did go to a lot of trouble to bring decent food to the colonials, right? I mean, we didn't have a remarkable cuisine in Australia in the early days. I think a baked meal was the only thing that was eatable. He's bought a lot of things like other people, like Joe Cromie, and small goods. So Albert's turning 90. He's been part of this community for a long time, and I wish him all the best. And would be nice if someone could send him a little note saying that this city, well, I'd like to think this community does appreciate him and all the work he's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Councillor McMahon and Councillor Kai.
Thank you. So on Monday, I attended Brand Tasmania's 5-year celebration. Brand Tasmania's mission is to inspire and encourage Tasmanians and those who want to be Tasmanian to quietly pursue the extraordinary. Brand Tasmania have done extensive research over their 5 years to find out about our hopes, dreams and concerns, and from that research they discovered the concern within our community around the poor early child literacy, and from that research the Little Tasmanian program was born, which is something I didn't actually know about until I went to the event on Monday. At the first appointment with a child health parenting service, every Tasmanian baby receives a Tasmanian library bag containing items that highlight the importance of the first 1,000 days of growing up in Tasmania. The message is simple. Someone just like you did it and you can do it too. Books that encourage literacy learning and positive messaging between parents and babies from a very young age. So I encourage you all to head to their website and just look at some of the really amazing work that group is doing. I also attended the flag raising at the Aboriginal Centre, celebrating NAIDOC Week. Now that we have our Aboriginal Partnership Plan in place, I look forward to Council identifying who and how a representative from the Aboriginal community will advise us in future strategies and strategic plans. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Kai.
So this Monday, the 8th of July, along with our new CEO, Sam Johnson, Mayor Garwood, Deputy Mayor Mackenzie and Councillor Mackenzie, I also attended the 2024 NAIDOC Week flag raising ceremony to mark the beginning of activities to celebrate and recognise the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. This year's theme, Keep the Fire Burning, Black, Loud and Proud, honours the enduring strength and vitality of the First Nations culture, with fire a symbol of connection to country, to each other and to the rich tapestry of traditions that defines Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The flag was raised by Elder Jeanette and Jeannie. The ceremony was held at the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre, along with the review of a beautiful new mural by artist James Cohen, known as Cream Art. The mural was as described by Daisy Allen. It's encompassing all the Tasmania and the culture of Aboriginal community in one image. Now, just a reminder to councillors and council staff that next Sunday on the 21st of July, the Launceston Historical Society will be running a Boot Up for a Bite of History, which is a virtual walking tour of Launceston's CBD with See You on the Road. It will be beneficial and educational for councillors and council officers to attend. It starts at 2 o'clock in the meeting room at the QV Museum at Inveresk. So hopefully see everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Councillor Walker.
Well, I rise to say that I didn't attend the NAIDOC Week flag raising ceremony, and I am doing that to apologise to the Aboriginal community. I was broken down on the Bass Highway about halfway between Deloraine and Launceston with my bonnet up and steam coming out of the engine. So that's my only excuse. But what I did stand up to say is how, proud I am of this council, how many councillors that do attend, and what a change that this is bringing about in our community. And I know, a bit like with the heritage local provisions, there's more that we can do. I know there's much more that we can do and that we will do, and significant things too. But just to see that change and the buoyancy and the positiveness, people educating themselves, because after all, it's not for the Aboriginal community to educate us, it is for us to educate ourselves. And that's what's going on through that experience. So I just had to stand up and say, I'm sorry that I missed it, and I apologise to my Aboriginal friends in the community, but it sounds like council was so well represented. Fantastic.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Further community reports from councillors? Okay, moving forward to 12 in the agenda, which is questions by councillors. 12.1, councillors' questions on notice. We'll see at 12.1.1, Deputy Mayor's question around Coronation Park play equipment. We'll also see in here Councillor Gibson's question with grants and sponsorship funds. 12.2, councillors' questions without notice. We have any questions without notice? Being none, we'll move forward to 13. We haven't got any notices of motion that have been identified as a part of this agenda. So looking at committee reports, 14.1 is the audit panel meeting. The recommendation is that council receives the report from the audit panel meeting held on the 21st of May. Somebody to move? Deputy Mayor? And seconded by Councillor Walker. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. And I think, again, it's an outline only in this report of what actually goes on at an audit committee meeting, which is quite intense and quite a lot of activity, as you can see there. I think it was asked by Councillor Gibson a few meetings ago about a more in-depth report. I think that's been dealt with by the fact that you now have the minutes of the meeting available to you to go and look at in your own time. And I guess that sort of just protects the integrity and the sensitive nature of some of the data that we actually talk about in there. So all councillors have the opportunity to do that. But I think there's a lot going on. We review things that have already been before council and note those, and often questions are asked by the independent audit panel members in regards to things that they see as different, and we bring, I guess, overall, we bring a real depth of experience from people who have either sat on other audit committees at other councils, have had some interaction with local government along the journey, and they just challenge officers and elected representatives about some of the things that we're doing in regards to that. So most of that you'll pick up if you read through the minutes that are there. I don't think there's really much more to say on that other than just go and read them if you wish to find out a bit more about the things that are noted there.
Thank you. A question before we get to the second, Councillor Gibson?
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks to Councillor McKenzie. Obviously, there are a number of significant documents at the purview of the Audit Committee. How does the Audit Committee and what role does the Audit Committee play with a new CEO? And what role does the chair of the Audit Committee have with regard to bringing the CEO up to, up to where they need to be with things like the risk register and other associated important council documents?
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. CFO.
Thank you for the question. I can see you looking at the Deputy Mayor when you were referencing the Chair of the Audit Committee. He is in fact not the Chair, it's an external member. So look, I imagine him and the new CEO will be having a discussion fairly soon before our next meeting at the end of August. And the Chair and the CEO will have some discussion on how they want the meeting to progress. As part of each meeting, the CEO prepares a risk certificate, which, as would suggest, highlights his key risks that he sees for the organisation. So, look, as I say, I imagine that the Chair and the CEO will work through that in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Walker is the seconder.
Thank you. And as the move of the motion said, there's a little bit of looking in the rear vision mirror when it comes to audit panel meetings. A very long look in the rear vision mirror, I might say. I think the last meeting went for 3 hours or so. Just to always be reviewing internally and externally council's policies, procedures, actions, and so forth, and yet having that independent sort of eye, or various eyes, I should say, as a part of that panel, looking over that. There's a schedule of yearly meetings that look at different aspects to the audit panel's work, and but essentially that process is ongoing. I'd love to see other councillors sort of take some more time, and if they wish to speak further to myself, I'm sure the Deputy Mayor about that, because it really is part of that nuts and bolts of council work. I suppose it's the inner hub around which everything rotates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the audit report? Anything to close, Deputy Mayor? There being nothing. So moving it to the vote then to accept the report. That is all councillors in favour, present, carried. Creative Arts and Cultural Services, sitting at 15. 15.1 is the QVMAG Strategic Plan 23 to 28. The recommendation is that Council endorse the draft Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery QVMAG Strategic Plan 2023 to 2028. Somebody to move. Councillor Gibson. Seconded by Councillor Harris. Councillor Gibson.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to stand and move this particular item. In some ways, this strategy document is the culmination of such a huge amount of work undertaken so far, and yet it's the launch pad of where we're going to be heading next. And I think it's testament to the whole team at QVMag that such a huge body of work has been undertaken in such a short amount of time. But most importantly, that the work hasn't been undertaken in isolation. It's underpinned all of the concurrent exhibitions, all of the concurrent community engagement and the vision for where Council sees QVMag heading to in the future. The approval of the paradigm shift, the QVMag Futures Plan, set, if you like, the direction and the need for all of the corresponding strategies and documents which underpin now this strategy. And I think the officer, the General Manager himself, says that whilst this is a 5-year plan, it really should be read with the understanding that it's a 10-year plan in terms of some of the capital improvements and capital infrastructure projects that are required. Importantly as well, there's been strong engagement from the many voluntary groups and committees that support and underpin the work of the QVMag, groups like the Friends, the Art Foundation, our Aboriginal Reference Group. And that is so important because it was only a couple of years ago where some of those groups and some of those volunteers felt disenfranchised and unhappy with the institution that they had supported for so long. Now what we have is a record number of exhibitions, a record number of people through both doors, a record number of community engagements and community exhibitions and outreach services, and I see that this will only continue to grow. Importantly, I love the audacious goals that are contained within that strategy, which sees us being inspired to get the institution to the heights that it really could be if other players in the space, the state government and other sources of revenue are able to be achieved. And I feel really content with where we've come so far and really secure in where we're heading. I note, of course, that we've got lots of new people at the QVMag, lots of people who've come from interstate and have added their skills and vitality to the institution. But importantly and equally, we've got lots of people who've been there for a lot of years who are working so hard to continue to evolve the institution into what it can be for our community and for the state and the country. I love that it's underpinned by best practice. I love that it's inclusive of lots of images of people who have enjoyed the exhibitions and the facilities that we've got. I love that it's cutting edge, and I think that the work that has been undertaken under the leadership of General Manager Shane and the paradigm shift that initiated by the former CEO before Shane arrived here, but essentially the grunt work that's been undertaken since Shane arrived is testament to where this institution can go and the way that this council, elected reps, have got behind that in recent years is an indication of the role of arts and culture in shaping the community that we're trying to create for our city moving forward. So I trust that all councillors will endorse this document today.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. As the seconder, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Gibson didn't leave us much more to say. He really did say it all. I also want to pass my thanks on to Shane and his team for such an outstanding document. I read it and then I thought, well, that ticks all the boxes. It really does on all of the other plans. It brings it all together. And there was one page that I just noted, and that was accountability, activation, accessibility, advancement and advocacy. That really sums it all up, those 5 words. And once again, very happy to support this. I'm sure everyone else will be too. And we now look forward to actually implementing the plan to see the change that can be at QVMag. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the speakers previously. I guess I'll start. I think we're changing the dial, I think, is probably a good apt description of what's happened. I don't think back in 2011 when Councillor Gibson and I ventured into the QVMag to do a report on what we thought it should be, that we'd think it had actually ended up where it's ended up. So I congratulate the General Manager in the work that's been put in, and I remember I said before, all the circles and the crosses, and I think they're all in that document as well, that were on your whiteboard the day I first came to meet you, and you've actually delivered on everything you said you were going to do in there. So as far as the document goes, I appreciate the work still to be undertaken in lots of cases, but I think it's a great roadmap for the future of our QVMag. It's funny, I sit back and I reflect. Wherever I go anywhere in the world, and maybe even anywhere in Australia, first thing I do when I go into a city is go to its cultural institutions. You go to the museums, it's part of what you do. I'm not sure that that's quite how we've always seen the QVMag, and I hope that the visitors do that, but I think that's certainly where we need to be, is where it is the first port of call alongside the gorge that we would go to when we come to a city like Launceston. As I said, third oldest city, and if you like to take Councillor Pentridge's narrative, it's the oldest city. I think it's something we should be actually really working hard to tell people this is a really important place in Australia's history. And we've got a lot of that, put away in our vaults, and some of it on display. So I think it's really important. And I think that with what Shane and his team have done in putting together the strategic plan, the direction we're going, is something that really gives us a purpose and a direction that I think will lead this institution into something which is more than what it already is, and it's already a great place. So I'm really fascinated and looking forward to seeing that journey unfold. Now, one of the things that I was really keen that we had in our statement in there was a value to the community, and I think that's been really well articulated about the educational benefits, the community identity benefits, the creativity benefits, the research benefits, and the economic benefits. A lot of people sit there and we always go and multiply the number of people come to a football match by a dollar figure, which works out how much the economic activity that we generated by Hawthorn coming to town this weekend. But how often do we do that? And I know you've done that in your reports, is try to articulate that, because the cultural tourism is just as important, and largely they actually stay longer. Often the football matches come and go, but a cultural thing actually lasts over a longer period of time, which I think the economic value of it, which a lot of people tend to say, oh, look at the money it costs, not what it actually generates. And I think we've got to turn that narrative around to talking about what it actually gives us as a city, both economically, but socially and culturally. So I endorse this.
Councillor Dawkins, then Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I won't go over old ground here, but of course everything that's been said today I absolutely endorse. I just want to pay tribute to GM Fitzgerald and the way that he talks about hierarchies and breaking them down. I think that's exactly what we need to talk about right now. If we want to get the best out of everyone that we work with, we need to break those hierarchies down and allow people to be empowered and share in the failures, but also absolutely in the successes. I'm really impressed by the inclusion strategy at QVMag. I'm really happy to see Pride being absolutely supported and empowering people in that community to get behind something like that when we're just talking about LGBTQI plus inclusion in the broader organisation. I want to acknowledge the challenge of bringing Palawa people into this institution, to acknowledge their contemporary contribution, while at the same time being a part of a decolonisation process. That's a challenge. I mean, that's a huge challenge, and I think one we're only just starting to understand. It's not just about the words we put on pages, but it's about the actions around these kind of really challenging ideas. So I think QVMag's going to lead on this, and I think the rest of the organisation and the rest of Launceston is going to need to catch up and follow.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Walker.
If I may just start with a couple of questions to the General Manager, Cultural Services. The plan suggests that we put the museum on a footing that would establish a board. How do you see that board interacting with the council? Indeed, would there be a council representative on that board, or would the CEO, or in a general sense, how would that interact with the council?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Well, that's hard to determine yet, as we haven't gone through the transition of governance process. But however, A makeup of a board like that would most likely have council representation and the City of Launceston representation on it as the asset owner of that collection and those buildings, and engaging that institution to deliver the services that it expects.
And certainly Councillor Dawkins, through you, Chair, has preempted my second question, which is our interaction with our living culture in Tasmania of the Palawa. How indeed, I know there's talk of the creation of an Aboriginal centre of science, but in terms of the reconciliation process that the council is going through, how does a museum, which I suppose historically museums are keepers of artefacts, it's keepers of history, when you have a culture that's a living culture, how do you keep that? I suppose it's the question through through the plan, I suppose, of having that Aboriginal centre. Yeah.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so just correct me if I don't, throughout the development of this strategic plan, in fact the futures plan as well, and all the supporting instruments, we have had deep engagement through our Aboriginal reference group, so that is made up of community. Representatives of that group also sit on our advisory board, so well connected into that space. And the initiatives and milestones and achievements, even the audacious goals that we have there, are collective. They're our decisions as a group to move forward on how to deconstruct the colonial narrative, empower those Indigenous communities, particularly in northern Tasmania, and undertake that journey. We're less concerned with the challenges of that because of that unified support, and looking at the challenges of providing a facility through which to be able to facilitate those initiatives. So that's the key for us as a group, and I refer to us as the Royal Us in that context, wanting to establish exactly those sort of aspirations that I think you're hinting at with regards to your question.
It certainly does, and I just thought it was important for that to be publicly explained. So I do rise to support this motion today. When the General Manager first arrived at our council a few years ago, I don't think many, if any of us, knew what to expect. We've all grown up in Launceston, going to the QV Mag as children, seeing various directors come and go, various controversies come and go, different exhibitions, stayed displays and exhibitions that get shifted around every now and then. What General Manager Fitzgerald has brought here is a quantum leap for our cultural services. It's not just in terms of its financial base or its governance model, its relationship with the Aboriginal community, its relationship with council, but it's building that relationship with Northern Tasmanians especially, and I suppose as a gateway for anyone who comes to Northern Tasmania, indeed people who access this information from all around the world. It's building on the basis that we always had here, and I think this is a familiar theme in Launceston, that sometimes we don't know what we've got under our own nose. And maybe sometimes it does take someone from outside to come and see that for what it is and see how that can be expanded and celebrated. And I do believe that's what the General Manager has done here, and he's done it in an inclusive way and an all-encompassing way. I think that, I did ask a couple of questions, but look, generally those questions are answered in this document. It was really just to highlight, I suppose, a couple of issues that I think of public concern, but what I'd really encourage, of course, is for people to take a look at these documents, take a look at the work that's been going into them, take a look at the inclusive nature and the potential for us to, I suppose, leapfrog as far as institutions go, leapfrog institutions around Australia and become a premier type of institution that is doing things in a modern way, that is interacting with its public digitally and in person, in a new way. And it has been mentioned to also focus on people who have been marginalised, people, you know, of northern Tasmania who maybe don't always get to experience that, for that outreach work across northern Tasmania, for us to become the premier cultural centre for all of northern Tasmania, in a way that no other institution in Tasmania has ever done. Yeah, so these are lofty ambitions, and I know that Councillor Gibson, through you, Chair, referred to the, just trying to find the audacious, decadal? It's a new word for me. I'm going to have to look it up later. Our audacious decadal goals to be an independently sustainable organisation, to complete the delivery of identified priority projects, which include the expansion of the Royal Park site, the development of a centre of Aboriginal science and education, the development of a collections discovery centre, and the completion of the Inveresk Cultural Community Creative Education Precinct. To have the most accessible collection of any regional museum in Australia, and to be the most programmatically diverse regional museum in Australia. Are they ambitious goals? Are they audacious goals? I think they're achievable goals, and I think what we've been presented with today is our way to achieve them. I congratulate you on your work, and I endorse the motion to the table.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments or questions around the table? Councillor Gibson to close.
Thank you, and thank you to those councillors that have spoken, and particularly those that have reiterated the goals over the 10-year period that we may well be able to get to. For me, I want to firstly recognise that this has been an iterative process that has and should celebrate all of the people that have gone before at QVMag to get us to where we are. Because in looking back, it's only in doing that we can look forward. There are lots of people out there who are working so hard in order for us to achieve the goals set out, the 8 goals set out in the strategy and those that Councillor Walker referred to. Importantly, one of those goals is a strong organisational culture, and I think it's only through having that we'll continue to be able to achieve those great goals. So we look forward to everyone, you know, working so hard in order for us as a community to be able to achieve the vision that we set ourselves. Australia's largest collection in terms of museum and art galleries, something to be celebrated. Over 1.5 million objects in the collection, absolutely significant. But more important to me is the role that QVMag has in its close connection with community. And what I think is needed next is not that the City of Launceston just does art and culture in one division at the QVMag and then has an arts and cultural strategy on the side, but rather that it's interconnected in everything that we do. So one of the things that I'll be looking forward to is when the tourism strategy comes to us, one of the principles of the tourism strategy will be the role that arts and culture, and importantly, that our own asset in that 1.5 million items in the collection can play in bringing to life cultural tourism. So important. The interconnectedness between the nature of us being a city of gastronomy and being a living institution that connects with its people and looks out and celebrates and finds ways to work with those that are marginalised in our community. Our purpose in building creative communities, in inspiring and educating the community can truly come to life when it becomes a whole of organisation rather than just a division. And certainly we've got the goals, we've got the strategies, we've got the will, we've got the people now to make that come to life. And I really congratulate Shane, you and the whole team and those that have gone before you, allowing us to get to this point. You've proven through the things that you've already undertaken that this is already alive. It's already embedded in everything that you're programming, everything that you're doing, and we look forward to it being fully realised and those 10-year goals perhaps being realised as well over the life of this strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Putting it to the vote. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Into Organisational Services Network at 16. 16.1 is a lease at Labrena Equestrian Club Incorporated. The recommendation is that the council decides to lease part of the land situated at 905 Conda Road, Labrina, known as the Labrina Recreational Ground, to the Labrina Equestrian Club Incorporated. It also has some details in here where it requires at 2 that the lease is on the following basis. The leasee is to be the Labrina Equestrian Club Incorporated. The lease is to commence on or as soon as possible after the 1st of October 24 for a period of 5 years. The commencing rent is to be $340.34, reviewed annually. The leasee is to be responsible for all outgoings, including energy, water usage and service charges, security monitoring and cleaning and operational maintenance. The lease is to keep the building clean and in good order, maintain the grounds of the property, hold public liability insurance for at least $20 million cover, and the council is to be responsible for structural maintenance. Somebody to move. Councillor Walker. Seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. And this is a renewal of an existing arrangement that we have there out at Labrina. I don't know if anyone else here has played cricket on Labrina Cricket Ground, but I certainly have. I think we managed to get beaten by Labrina. I think there was, caught us by surprise with a couple of fast bowlers on the day. But nonetheless, this is part of the Labrina Recreation Ground. You've got the hall there, you have the cricket ground and probably football ground in the past as well. And the horse sort of equestrian area to one side. I don't think there's much of a building there. There might be a storage shed or something like that, and there's not much more to it than that, really. So it's a very straightforward piece of land. As long as you can still play cricket there, I'm happy. So I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge?
No, I agree, but once again with Councillor Walker. I think the activities for youth and horses and such events as this should be encouraged. And I think we're doing the right thing. We're not charging them a lot of money. I hope we support them to whatever extent we have to.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments around the table? The questions? Anything to close, Councillor Walker? Great. Putting it to the table, then all those in favour? All councillors present, the motion is carried. At 16.2, we have a disposal of interest in land, 16 to 30 Waverley Road, Waverley. The recommendation is that council decides by absolute majority to dispose of an interest in land by agreeing to cancel the existing easements, decides also to acquire easements to contain stormwater and drainage infrastructure as shown in the agenda, as well as it makes recommendation 1 subject to the owner of 16 to 30 Waverley Road, Waverley, paying the following costs. $3,152 plus GST for council fees for a disposal of land in the interests of this proposal. At B is $800 plus GST for the cost of obtaining the valuation. C, $1 for the easement, if deemed, and all associated costs with the Land Titles Office registration. Someone to move. Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
What a very practical outcome. I think it's great that they've been able to redesign the stormwater so that they can actually put it in a more suitable position rather than right through the middle of the block, which obviously makes the blocks more usable from their perspective, so it makes a lot of sense. And the costings really are reflecting what we've spent to actually get that into place. I think it's appropriate that they reimburse us for the costs that we incur and nothing more.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris?
Nothing further to add. As you said, a very common sense approach to free up the land and move the stormwater to the side to allow more usable land. And glad to see that, because it was only an easement, we didn't own the land, we only had the easement through their property to then sell it to them for $1 if demanded.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any further comments around the table? Anything to close, Deputy Mayor? All those in favour, putting it to the vote? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. We have no late items at 17, so meeting closed at 3:25. Next meeting will be here at 1 p.m. on the 25th of July. Thanks, councillors. Easy.